When a whale dies, its colossal body embarks on a final journey, one that will transform it into an entire ecosystem. This is a story of decay, death, and renewal, a cycle that reveals the dark and fascinating truth about life after death in the ocean's depths. Whales are the largest creatures on Earth, some weighing as much as 200 tons. But just like every living thing, whales eventually die. Today, we're going to dive into what happens to their bodies after death and how that single event shapes life in the deep ocean. Whales can live for decades, with some species, like the bowhead whale, reaching over 200 years of age. But whether through age, illness, injury, or even human intervention, death comes to them all. When a whale dies, its body doesn't simply disappear. Instead, it begins an incredible, yet gruesome transformation. When death finally comes, the whale's enormous body slowly starts to sink. But before it does, something strange happens. Often their body will bloat. Gases produced by decomposition make the carcass swell, turning it into a kind of floating balloon. During this floating stage, seabirds, sharks, and other scavengers gather, taking advantage of the free meal. It's a chaotic feast, with pieces of flesh being ripped away. But the real transformation begins once the whale sinks into the deep. When the gases that keep the whale afloat escape or are consumed by scavengers, the body begins its slow descent to the ocean floor. This sinking event, known as a whale fall, marks the start of an extraordinary process that can last decades. In the abyssal depths of the ocean, where sunlight never penetrates and pressure is immense, life is scarce. But when a whale carcass arrives, it's like a gift from above, a massive, nutrient-rich bonanza that sparks a feeding frenzy. As the whale's body hits the seafloor, it doesn't take long for deep-sea scavengers to arrive. Hagfish, sleeper sharks, and giant amphipods swarm in, tearing into the whale's flesh. These creatures, evolved for life in extreme conditions, make quick work of the whale's soft tissues. Hagfish, in particular, are notorious for their feeding methods. They drill into the flesh, eating from the inside, while also secreting slime to protect themselves from competitors. It's nature at its most brutal. For days, sometimes weeks, this feast continues. But eventually, all that remains are bones. And that's where things get even stranger. Once the flesh is gone, only the bones remain. But even the bones aren't wasted. Deep-sea organisms, specifically a type of worm called Osedax, or zombie worms, arrive to feast on the whale's skeleton. These bizarre creatures don't have mouths or stomachs. Instead, they drill into the bones, releasing acid to break them down and absorb the nutrients directly. Osedax worms are fascinating creatures. They survive in one of the most hostile environments on Earth by turning bones into sustenance. Some of these worms have tiny symbiotic bacteria living inside their bodies, helping them digest the nutrients in the bones. It's a prime example of nature's ability to adapt and thrive, even in death. But the story doesn't end with the bones. Over time, the whale fall becomes an entire ecosystem of its own, supporting life for decades. The decaying bones and the nutrients they release attract a variety of life forms. Tiny crabs, deep-sea snails, and fish congregate around the carcass, taking advantage of the nutrients still being released by the decaying whale. Some of these animals spend their entire lives around whale falls, relying entirely on the nutrients that come from them. In a way, the death of a whale gives birth to new life, supporting a unique community that might not exist without it. A single whale fall can feed an ecosystem for up to 50 years. So even in death, a whale continues to give life, transforming the barren depths of the ocean into a thriving community. The death of a whale may seem tragic, but it's also a reminder of the delicate balance of nature. From the scavengers that tear its flesh, to the worms that feast on its bones, and the ecosystems that emerge from its remains, the whale's body is far from wasted. Life and death are intertwined in the ocean, and the whale fall is a perfect example of how nature recycles itself. It's a process that reminds us of both the fragility and resilience of life in the deepest, darkest places on Earth. Thanks for watching this episode of Creature Carnage. If you enjoyed this dive into the grim but fascinating world of whale falls, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. There's plenty more dark secrets of the animal world to uncover. Until next time, stay curious.